Hi, and welcome to Watercolor with Sonia. Today we're going to do a beautiful humpback whale. I'm just going to show you the picture here that was actually taken by one of my students that paints with me. And it's just an incredible picture of all the water that came out while they were up in the area of Desolation Sound. So with their boat. So I'm going to start off showing you different methods that you can, because you're seeing a blank piece of paper here right now, different methods that you can do to get some of these water effects. So the first one I'm going to use is a fine liner. And the fine liner allows you to just really lightly, with the tip of the pen, needle, sorry, and let me just show you what that looks like. Fine liner resist. This is masking fluid, but you can hardly see it. So I'm just going to tap really lightly and scrape a bit here where the water is coming off, and then up here. So you see this process is quite labor intensive, and where you'd like to see it is really on the darker area so that the white comes right out. Especially along here. So I'm just going to do, and I'm trying not to squeeze too much. Right, and a little bit more up here. All right, so that's lots of masking fluid at the moment, and I'll just scrape some of this around a little bit, so it just gives me a little bit more of, not just a dot, but a little bit more of a feeling of splashing. So we have lots of other area, and by the way, you have to attach this back into this particular area, otherwise it'll dry up. Very, very important, because it can be very frustrating otherwise. And then you just tighten it up again. Okay, so there are other ways to also do this. Now I'm using a yellow crayon right now just so that you can see maybe a little bit of where I'm waxing. So you can wax, and it will also keep the water and the coloring from actually coming up. Preferably a clear white wax would be better, because then it's less likely for any interaction of colors and stuff like that. And I'm just going to add a little bit more there. But then there is even more, where you could just take masking tape, and where you see the larger areas of water coming out here, you could actually mask it. So I'm going to do that because there's this area right in here that has a lot of water. So I'm just going to take that, and actually I'd rather like to have the rough edges in some of the areas, but I need to shape it more for the others. So I'm going to do that right there. And a little bit more. I missed a little bit here. I'll shape that a bit there. And do the same right here. Because you really don't want straight lines. And here is okay because it's right on the edge of the water. So let's do this also on the other side. I'm going to take it and actually do it this way. And then just a little bit. Now you see I don't want this, sorry, just knocking my video camera. I don't want that coming out like that because the tape should come this way. Let's try that. Like this, and then bunching that up there. Okay, and then I don't want it being, I can do a little bit here, so let's just let's see which way the tape can work. Alright, so why am I doing all this? Because I want to be able to capture the whites and keep them without having to spend a lot of time working around it. Sometimes it's actually easier to do that, but and then we're going to do a lifting technique as well, and also some spraying techniques that will help, all part of trying to keep the whites in the process. Today I'm going to be using Ultramarine Blue. This is Cotman Ultramarine Blue. This is Winsor Newton Red Shade, Winsor Blue Red Shade. These are all Ultramarine Blues. Here's a Van Gogh that's an Ultramarine Blue Deep. They will all work. And then I have Phthalo Blue Green Shade. And if I use Phthalo Blue Green Shade, I have to add some red to it in order to actually create the right blue. So I'm going to begin with the sky, and then I'm going to continue into the water. Now, other colors that you could use, Antwerp, Prussian blue, all the ones that, if you use lighter blues like cobalt, let me just show you what a cobalt looks like. Let me find a brush here. That's quite important. Those things are important from the perspective of if you use a cobalt, it's got a little bit more of a lighter blue. Let me just bring that up. This is cobalt. Okay. Now this is great for a sky, but it can be a little intense for the sky. Let me show you what the phthalo blue green shade looks like. There it is right here. You can see that there. It has greener value in it. There you go. So it would be good for ice and things like that. Not too much of the difference, but there's a little bit of white added in here in order to get that to that color. And if you were to add, here's the, let's do this, the phthalo blue green shade, and you add, say, an alizarin crimson to it. There you go. Now you're getting a darker blue, which is mostly like what the ultramarine blue is. It's almost to the purple edge. I could use a little bit more phthalo in there just to get it a little bit more, again, bluish. Okay, so what's the first thing to do? Wet the whole paper. Now I don't have my spray handy, so I'm going to use a larger hack brush. And this is a large hack brush, and you dip it into the water. Now my water is already starting to get blue because I was showing you some items of blue, so I'm just going to dip it in there and get the water and really make this all wet. It's better. Sometimes I have to, when I'm demonstrating, do it on a non-flat surface, so I'm actually painting maybe with it standing up. And so this is much harder to do when you're standing up because the paint and the water start to float down on the page. So here I do want a little bit of elevation because it'll help with the wash. So I'm going to put my masking tape underneath, and it's going to give me a little bit of a, probably about a 15% angle, and that's helpful. Now the other big thing that you need to do is make sure you have sufficient paint. So squeeze out from the tube or take it from your palette. My Winsor Blue red shade is getting a little bit. There it is. I'm going to show you there. I'm going to put that into my tray, and that'll give me plenty of beautiful color. So there you go. There's lots of pigment here. I don't want it necessarily that intense, so I need to add a little bit more water to it. Let me just do that right there. Especially for the first layer, I don't want it to be that, so I'm going to give a nice light layer. There we go. So we're going to go across, and we're going to start from the top, and what we're trying to do is achieve a bead here as we're going down so that we don't get any lines in between. And I'm going right over my whale, and you can start to see where the wax resist is. You're not going to necessarily see where the areas where I put the masking fluid, and I have to say again, that masking fluid has to be dry, but it was so thin that it dried very rapidly. And so we're just going to continue along here. Now in this corner here, I just may have pressed a little too hard with my brush, and there's some bristles from my hacky brush, so I've got to try and get rid of those. Okay. There we go. Just quickly go across here again. Now down here in the water too can be fun because you can add a little bit more value if you wanted to in some of the areas, although I see that there's quite a bit of light in the rest of the water too. Okay, so if I found that this was too intense for my sky, I could definitely lighten it by touching it with a little bit of tissue. So I'm just going to grab some tissue. In my case, it's going to be some paper towel. And so you could go in and you could lift that and create more of a mottled sky, like it was maybe a bit cloudy or cloudy mist around. And this is also another lifting technique because he has a bit of spray, and so we could definitely just lift some more in this area to capture that. Now what happens when, and I try not to put your fingerprints in there, what happens when you start to lift is if the paper is very wet, it will just kind of reaccumulate in that area. So you kind of have to watch the way the paint is going and dab accordingly. There's a bit of kind of a misty area there. And then make sure also that, just like I'm doing right now, getting my fingers into the paint, try and keep and avoid that process. Now there's another technique which would take a little longer to explain, but I'm just going to take away my elevation because now I want it to, so you can see everything. It's plastic wrap. If you have some plastic wrap and you want to try it out, you can take the plastic wrap and just place it down here, but you have to let it dry in order for the main effects to really happen. And you have to have enough pigment because it lifts basically and creates little lines in between. My paper is too wet in order for that to happen. Okay, having done that, I'm now going to go back in and I need a darker color. So I'm going to add a little bit of red to my blue to create a little more intense blue here. And we'll start at the line of the sky here. Now that looks a little too purple for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just spread that out. See how wet that is? That's actually creeping up and I don't really want that, so I should have let that dry a bit more. Anyways, our beautiful whale is going to be that dark, so let's bring some more color into him. And his dorsal fin at this point, I'm just going to push that all the way over, is I believe actually goes across here like this, because in some pictures, and I'm going to show you another one, the dorsal fin looks a little different and looks like he's jumping in a different fashion. So let me just show you one I found from Holland, America that had a good impression of a whale with. There's another one. So you see how this is actually one of the fins, and that's the other fin on that side, and you can actually see the striations on the belly of the whale. I don't believe that's what we're seeing on our image. Let me bring back our image. I think the other dorsal fin is here, and he flipped it, and that's what you're seeing is the water. Okay. Bring back my reference photo so I can see what I'm doing here. Always easier. So right now I have done some lifting and things like that. You can see where the paint is kind of separating out there where it's still really wet. I need to take that off because we don't want that much there. This is okay here. So we need to really let that dry. We could let that dry by doing a little bit of hair drying, or we can just wait. So what I'm going to try now is to try and figure out the color. It's really a gray mixed in with a blue for the whale. So I'm just going to try and see if I can bring in a little bit of gray into his coloring. There we go. Now I see some more hack brush little filaments there, so I've got to try and brush those away. I'll try and get them onto the masking fluid. Sorry, the tape. Let's try that. As soon as I start pressing in and picking up, and I just noticed today, I forgot about the fact that it's raining. that also creates even more moisture on the paper, making it even harder sometimes to really achieve what you want because the paper is so much moist. So I'm going to take just a moment here and take a break. So the paper is still quite damp, and it's given me some interesting little watermarks and things around here. So I'm going to work with that. I'm going to continue working with a little bit more Paynes Grey with a smaller brush and to get our whale looking more like the color we want. It is so damp still that I'm noticing that even if I put down the Paynes Grey, it's separating colors quite a bit. So we'll see how that works. So when you add water with the pigment over top of what's already there, if the water from your brush is more than what's on the paper, it tends to make watermarks and pushes the pigment around. And so that's what we're getting right now. Now, since I want some areas that are a little bit more spray, I can work with this right now. I keep adding the gray in and slowly get my whale to start looking like he's supposed to. Now the dorsal fin looks a little drier, so you can see the difference where it's dry and where it's not. So I'm going to slowly work around here. And our last form of defense, if I can't get the water to really look the best, is we'll be using titanium white to get some of those whites back. So slowly he's emerging now, and there's quite a bit of whites in here, so I'm just going to try and keep it a little bit loose. And try and put in just a few dark marks, because we can always add more dark, right? So to show you what I mean about adding water, I can take my brush and then just tap along here. Not enough. Oh, it worked down here a bit. And you're going to see now the water spots coming through as I tapped. So we're going to leave that for the moment. Now there's some shadow down here, but before I get into the shadow, I need to take the tape away. Because if I don't, I'm going to have even more difficulty. So let's get the tape away. Sorry. Okay, so now you can see how that's helped us keep the whites. Except now I have blue all over my fingers, so I need to find my tissue again. So eventually what we're trying to do is get a little bit more of that water in there. So I'm going to go back to my other flat brush, and I'm going to now try and add another layer here. Let's go across. Just to the edge here, because it's nice and dark right along the edge of the water. Right, and now I'm going to take a little bit more of my paint, and I'm going to slowly paint in some of the water. There's different values in the water, so I'm going to try and just dry brush it. That's what you call dry brushing along here. And now I've got to try and put in little bits of blue so it starts to look like there was actual spray going on. And I'm going to come across here a bit until we leave that completely white. Okay, so now we'll come back here and we'll do some more dry brushing. Here's a little bit smoother, so I'm going to just nicely go across. And we'll add some more detail afterwards there. I'm just going to get these touched up. Now let's go back up here. And one of the things with glazing is when the area is dry, it's much easier to get the color to sit and be, and you can see right away that that's actually happening. So I'm just watching now and looking where that water is coming down. I'm going to take a little bit more intense blue and get it in here a bit more. A little dry brushing there, a little bit. I can come back in with a tissue in just a minute. I'm just going to try and make this look a little bit more real. Okay, and then I'll come back over here and do some more movement. Okay, so he's starting to look like there's actual splashing going on. Now there's some reflection there, so I can go back and get some of the gray and add some of that reflection in here, as long as it's not too dry. And I want a little bit of wet so it diffuses a bit. So we're just going to put that out here. It kind of comes all the way out a little bit like that. And then there's another area here which is quite dark in between here with his fins. All right. So we've got a bit of sky, what looks like could be now a mountain out there because of just the way the water went. But we'll leave that just the way it is. I'm not going to even change that. Just going to make that look like it's misty and possibly the way it's supposed to be. Bring that back in, bring that over a bit darker. Put a little bit more in there. Try and soften that up a bit, just so it's not so intense and one straight line across. Okay. So I don't have the ability to spray here right now, or pardon me, to put in a hairdryer. So I'm now just going to take some more of my gray and get it set up here. And now trying to bring in a little bit of a darker color here, especially on the back. So I'm using a small brush so I can get more pigment on, but this brush has really good water ability, so it's still got a lot of water on it. And it still seems to be very damp in here too. Okay, and there's lots of splash of water around here and in here. And then again, that shadow is right in there. So let's see if I can add just a bit more to the fin bit. And there was little bits of coral or something up here, so I'm going to add a little bit of that in there. This is still hanging around. Yeah, it's attached itself to the, it looks like, oh, there we go. Okay, so we could come back in here and add just it's a little bit, maybe no, that's too much shadow, I was going to say, for the water. And sparkles a little bit of reflection. Because it is just a tiny bit different color as it's coming down a bit. Here especially, there's a little bit more of a reflection there. So we'll try just a little bit here. Oh, gotta be careful. And it picked up a little bit more of the bluish purple. And there's a bit more of that color coming out here. And it's just separated again. There we go. So I would recommend even a smaller brush if that was the case. Okay, and I'm going to get some nice dark in between there. There's some nice darks along here that we can add just in. And it's still wet enough that it's softening up quite nicely. And the whole idea is by softening, it gives you a little bit more of a chance to vary it a bit. Let me bring in another brush here, a tiny brush, that maybe I can show you how to. If it's dry, you can lift it a bit. You have to dry the brush again, lift it a bit, go back in, dry it a bit, back in, dry it a bit. Here too, you could do the same thing if you wanted to, but again, it's back and forth, back and forth. You have to really, even in here, if we want to try and lift, this is a little wet still, and it's going to be harder to do that while it's still very wet. It's almost easier to wait and then come back in with a magic eraser and lift it again that way. Just cover that, put that a little bit more like a straight line. And spraying out like that. But I want to keep it as, and there's some really nice whites in there. So this is going to have to dry for a bit. So I'm going to have to stop the video and wait for it to dry. It's one of the things we're going to have to really pay attention to when we're actually doing it in class. So we'll take a break. I have now dried this with a hairdryer so that we can speed up the process a bit. I'm going to go back into my gray now and try and really darken up some of the beautiful areas in here. Again, using more pigment than and dry brushing. So hopefully, given that the underneath is still kind of wet, that I can get more of that feel of the spray coming off and things like that. Now we haven't removed any of the masking fluid, right? So that helps too. A bit more gray in here. Now if I felt that it was too choppy in some of these areas, I could just take a soft wet brush and just add a little bit more too, like this. So I've cleaned out my brush, I've dabbed it, and now I'm coming back in and just softening a little bit. This is only water now that I'm using. Okay, let's go back to the dorsal fin. Okay, so we've got variations in color. We've got, I think, enough that we can work with to maybe a little bit more up on top here. Because what happens is when you put the white gouache over top, it'll look better when it's actually darker. It's a bit more dark in here. And while I'm at it, I can take some of that coloring that I have and just add some of these beautiful dark waves in here. Yeah, it transitions a bit. More color in here. So these lines that you're seeing here are a bit too strong for me, so I'm going to now take my brush and with a little water just soften them up a bit and get them a little bit more integrated. And that's me just kind of brushing over a dry surface on the paper. Now what I can do also, because the water is a little darker, is I could go again one more time over with the blue. So here we go. As long as this is dry enough, it will create a nice glaze. I'm seeing parts where it kind of carries out there. And then we can do the same on the other side here, just trying to avoid anything that we don't want in terms of the spray. And it's a bit lighter over there. Okay. Okay, so the water's gotten darker. And eventually I could put a few more nice lines in here as well where you see the darks. I'm going to let that just a little bit more like that. Kind of get that feeling for the water coming in and splashing. And I'm going to do the gouache there and that other area. Now, I have to let that dry again. And so let's try, while we're waiting, to show you. This is not gouache, this is regular white watercolor. So you can see that effect first. Now I have to, here it is right here. I can use it from the tube as well. This is my pan, and I should really refill my pan. Because what I want is a lot of pigment. So that's too wet and too floppy. I want it nice and sharp so that I can go in. So there's too much water on here right now. I need a smaller brush. So let's go back in here and attempt it with this one. There we go. So what happens is it takes a while to really get, so this is where when I pull the masking fluid off, hopefully you're going to really see the white of the paper. But in the meantime, we'll just do a little bit more gouache in here and even bring it up here. Now I need to add a bit more water because now the pigment is just pigment and I can't get it to blend at all. Okay, so I'm putting that back in here. So the more time you can take, if you have it, to put your masking fluid in, you're going to be very happy with that. And then finally, if all else, there's still, like I mentioned, the lifting and things like that, but there's still also gouache, which is whiter, and it's watercolor gouache will allow you to get a little bit more of that spray on afterwards. I'm just going to put some in there, some there, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to dry this again. Okay, so let me go dry this, and then I can show you, I'll lift the masking tape off, and then we can follow up with a few more of those techniques. I'm back after drying everything again. This is a rubber cement eraser, and it helps when you're pulling off masking fluid, because you don't have to burn your finger when you're going in and actually lifting. So now you're going to see what the masking, where the masking fluid was, and you can see what was left from that. So whenever you're rubbing it off, it will create this little rubber edges, which you eventually, they'll pile up and you just pull it off of here. So the other thing to do would be then to also just touch the paper and see if you can get it to work that way. Okay. So now you see a few more of the watermarks in here that are really white. And I wanted to show you the magic eraser as well, and the technique that we could do for that too. So you take 2 little pieces of masking tape, and say for example right along here we didn't get enough of that line that we wanted. We could take and very, very thinly put a little between this area. We're going to wet the magic eraser, and we're going to rub where we want that to come off. Okay, and then if we lift it, we're going to get these very sharp edges. So we'd have to come back in with our little brush, and oh, there's my little brush, and a little bit of our gray. And you'd have to come back in and just add some more coloring and then mix that up with the other stuff. So I'm going to go back to my larger brush, which has seemed to have disappeared just a moment. Okay, we'll use this other liner and see if we can now, just looking at the picture, there's some really nice dark areas in here, so I'll use this liner to get in some more of the darks. Some definition of that area. I have better brushes. I'm just don't want to reach for them through the video here. Let's try that one. All right, let's go back. So I'm going straight into the pigment to try and get that really nice dark coloring. And I'd say the darkest parts on my image that I have are the back area here, and then in here a little bit more too, and on the dorsal fin a bit more. Okay, and one of the areas I also noticed down here, we could have added more white in here. So we could again just use the magic eraser and just lift a little bit more if we wanted to there. But again, the more control you have over that area, the better it is. So just be careful that you're not wiping everything off that you don't want to. So it wasn't quite as strong there, so let's go back in with a little bit more gray and bring that back in like that. So you can get the feeling that the water is being splashed up. A bit more dark than that. Let's go back to the other brush. Just trying to even out some of these so it doesn't look like too many uneven strokes and it combines. And again, we want more shadow down here. This is all dry brushing now. So I could do one more little bit of a wash here if I'm careful, because it just seems to go back and forth a bit more like this in a little darker color. I could come back in here too. And I see a bit more color over here, using the really just the tip of the flat brush. A bit more here. That seems to be giving me a better angle than I had with the other round brush that I was using, which is about a 3 or 4, maybe a 6 actually, for the amount of water that was on there. So here, I'm going to come back in with a little bit more, just a few darks in here. Okay, and I don't know, that's my Ultramarine Blue here. Yeah, it's also Ultramarine Blue. I was just looking to see if I had my gouache handy. I don't, so I'm going to clean my brushes and I'll be right back. Alright, so we have gone through and we've used magic eraser, we've used candle, we've used the regular white, Chinese white that you saw here and there. We've used, what else have we used? Just layering and glazing. And then, now I've got some white gouache. This is ZInc White gouache. So I've washed my brushes. I'm now going to take one of my small brushes and I'm just going to go straight into the tube. And hopefully this is active enough. It's going to get a little dry. So white gouache is very opaque, but it is made with gum arabic. And so for final details, you could go in here and what happens is it doesn't blend in like the other white does. It just sits on top. So it allows me then to, let's see, I don't know that you're going to see much white up here because it is, you know, the value has to be strong enough that you can actually see it up there. And so let's put a little bit more around here. I mean, you could go to town on all of it and just keep adding. So, but what you want to try and make it realistic, right? So you want this, that little bits of dab that would get you definitely around there. And here, you can put it just right in here with this area so that it looks more like it's spraying off in here. Oh yeah, we use the masking tape. That's right, we use masking tape to get a lot of that white staying there. And that was helpful because it allowed us to not have to deal with all sorts of stuff. And we use the masking, the magic eraser down here just to bring back some of that. And I see some whites down here now. So I'm just going to add a little water in here. And so where I see the whites, there's some reflection just in here a bit. So I would probably have put that with masking fluid now that I see that those are there. Right along here. There's even a bit of reflection of white in here, which you could always go back in and put in. But not a whole lot. Few. It's like just a little bit of reflecting here. And I think we've captured it. So this is our humpback whale up in the Desolation Sound area. Thanks for watching.